time. At one time he was planning to take that up as a full-time career, running his father's factory. It isn't that he just worked in abstraction in the knowledge system. The time has come for the University of Delhi to try and show the way, to carry the torch forward for this nation, which in any case is reawakening. Let not history record that the University of Delhi was found faltering at this moment of trial. We need to somehow reinvent and gear ourselves for the news and need of the nation. And how do we do that? Our knowledge systems, our colleges must organize activities and events that flow into the minds of their students, and their own actions flow into society. And we are working hard, and I invite everyone to help us in this enterprise. We are trying to move towards a new undergraduate program. We are doing that with care, with caution, with enormous consultation. We have organized open academic congresses, meetings with groups of teachers, and we keep doing that. A task force of 61 members is now deliberating, even as I speak with you, on its own recommendations based on all the feedback that we've obtained from more than 4,000 faculty, thousands of students and parents, and our own mindsets. And that will be brought forward to various systems, our academic executive councils, but all of us need to be participants and partners. No system will be affected in any adverse way, otherwise it is not sustainable growth. We will be linked with the needs of society, and in these ways we will be linked with our own needs. And of course, I'm also occasionally confronted by colleagues who suggest or ask or worry that there may be some losses in jobs. I have been informed by the task force that in every single department the job will go up manifold. They have made clear numerical calculations of jobs. Jobs will also go up. There will be far more positions. And I ask you to join hands with us. Take this university forward. In many ways, this college shows the way. Share with us your experiences. I am really grateful that you gave me this chance to be here. I'm delighted to see so many participants from abroad. This is a conference that occurs every 3 years. They chose India and they chose Bhagat Singh College to be the hosts for this year. I would say they can come back every 3 years and we would be happy to have them. Thank you very much.
Words of enlightenment, in addition to being words of encouragement, let me assure you, sir, you have bolstered our confidence, and we promise to take this institution miles ahead in the days to come in all academic domains. Thank you very, very much, sir. Now, I would actually like, in fact, Professor Singh has to move, but you have to stay back for a little while more. We have to honor some of the guests. We have Professor P.K. Sahu, who is the Vice Chancellor of Utkal University, and we have Professor S.K. Veech, who has been the former governing body chairman and Dean of Students, University of Delhi. And we have also Professor Nutan Rasutra. He has come from a degree college from University of Jammu. So I would request Honorable Vice Chancellor to felicitate our special guests by presenting us honor to these dignitaries. I would call upon Professor P.K. Sahu. Please, if you could come on the dais, sir. Professor Sahu, if you could come and say, just 1 minute, please, if you could say a few words.
Mr. Vice Chancellor, Professor Singh, other dignitaries on the desk, delegates, my dear students, ladies and gentlemen, media persons, I'm happy and delighted to be here with you. And the This college is organizing an excellent international conference, IOST conference, a grand success. Thank you all. Jai Hind, Jai Jagannath.
Welcome, Faith. It's a delight and honor to have you from us.
Vote of thanks for this inaugural session. Now, Degree 2 is on the dais, participants, faculty and volunteers. It's my great honor and privilege to propose a vote of thanks for the inaugural session of NEST 2012. Despite a very pressing schedule, Honorable Vice Chancellor Professor Singh spared his very valuable time to be with us and inaugurate this conference. I am Dev of Shahid Bhagat Singh Evening College and our partners ICM Business School, France, Serifigay and Sibel, Georgia Tech College of Management. Thank you for your presence and for inaugurating the conference. Our heartfelt thanks are due to the conference co-chairs, Professor Sylvester Ivanay and Vera Ivanay, and also to Dr. Francis Ulgado for adding the glitter by their august presence today in the inaugural session of the conference. Thank you very much, Sylvester, Vera, and Francis. Distinguished Professor Paul Srivastava was bound to attend a conference somewhere. In fact, despite a very tight schedule and a long travel plan, he agreed to be a part of this conference and consented to deliver the keynote address. Sir, your august presence has been a pleasure and we are honored and privileged. Thank you very much for being with us here today. Our special thanks are due to Professor Patrice Laroche. Probably his flight is delayed a little bit and he may be joining us sometime later. And he will be chairing the Dean Plenary after this inaugural session is over. We are very grateful to Professor Laroche for his presence here today. Professor Roy is not here with us today. He was supposed to come, probably he is busy somewhere else, so he was held up for some time in a traffic jam. And we have other guests, Professor P.K. Sahu, Professor Veech, Dr. Nutan Asutra came from different parts of the country to grace this occasion. They may manage to stay their preoccupations to attend this event and give the event the benefit of their erudition and experience. We are honored, we are thankful, and we are grateful to you for being a part of this conference. Thank you very much, sir. Our special thanks are due to the conference advisor and college governing body chairman, Shri Siddharth Mishra, who despite of a busy schedule spared his valuable time to be with us here today and make the ceremony a success. Thank you very much, sir, for this very kind gesture. And last but not the least, the college principal and conference patron, Dr. P.K. Khurana, has been behind the preparations of this event rock solid all this while. He deserves all the appreciation and felicitation for everything that he is doing to make the event a success. Dr. Khurana, your presence today is not just inspiring, but motivating in more than one way. To you, we are grateful and thank you for being here today with us in this inaugural session of NEST 2012. And finally, a big thanks to the august gathering here comprising of delegates, faculty, students and researchers from across the length and breadth of this country, besides from other countries, as much as to the delegates from abroad. Thank you very much. Now we break for a tea, and after the tea break we will join for the... Sorry.
We'll have plenary.
Okay, that will continue? Okay. Now we will have the plenary address, and for that I'll invite... Professor P.K. Sahu is there.
मैं अनाउंस
हाँ, आप अनाउंस कर दो। एक मिनट, ये है। So, sir, could you please take a seat on the dais? Please be seated for the keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. We are continuing with the session. Please be seated. Paul Srivastava, who is currently the David O'Brien Distinguished Professor and Director of the David O'Brien Center for Sustainable Enterprise at the John Molson School of Business, Concordia University, Montreal. Professor Srivastava will be delivering the keynote address. I'll request my colleague Dr. Omkar Singh Deval to please come on the stage and welcome Paul Srivastava by offering him a bouquet and a souvenir. Dr. Deval, please. Professor P.K. Sahu. It's already done. Yeah. So I leave the dice to Professor Sahu. Please conduct the yeah. Now Professor Paul Srivastava will be delivering the keynote address, and before I ask him to deliver the address, I would like to briefly introduce him to you. Professor Paul Srivastava is currently the David O'Brien Distinguished Professor and Director of the David O'Brien Center for Sustainable Enterprise at the John Monson School of Business, Concordia, University of Montreal. He founded the non-profit Industrial Crisis Institute Incorporation in New York and published the Industrial Crisis Quarterly. He founded Organization and Environment published by Sage Publications. Dr. Srivastava received his PhD from the University of Pittsburgh. He has published 15 books and over 100 articles in scholarly and professional journals. He won a Fulbright Senior Scholar Award to study Japanese corporate environment management at Kyoto University. His work has been featured in the Los Angeles Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Christian Science Monitor, and on the Maclean Leonard Gazette. May now request Professor P.K. Sahu to conduct the proceedings of the session. Professor P.K. Sahu, over to you, please.
I want to begin by thanking Sylvester and Vera and Ravi for organizing this conference and inviting me to be with you. I also want to thank Professor Khurana, Professor Anand, Professor Kaul, Sunil Kumar, all the people who've been putting time into making this happen. I want to acknowledge Shahid Bhagat Singh College, and particularly the founder, Shahid Bhagat Singh himself, as a revolutionary, as a martyr, as somebody who sacrificed his life, as a young person who was inspirational. And what I have to say today takes inspiration from Shahid Bhagat Singh's life itself. I want to also welcome all our guests, esteemed colleagues from various parts of the world, faculty of Shahid Bhagat Singh College, students of the college. And thank you, Professor Kaul, for that kind introduction. But I'd like to give a minor introduction of myself, which was presented to me as I landed in India last week by the passport control officer, who asked me, "Aap kahan ke hain? Where are you from?" And he was looking at my passport and he was looking at the form, the customs form I had filled out. And since I have a US passport, I said, America, I said. And he shook his head. And he said, "No, you've given the wrong answer." So I said, maybe he is looking at my home address. And my home address is in Montreal, Canada. So I said, "Oh, no, not US, Canada." And he said, "No." So I started getting a little nervous, because when the passport officer was shaking his head negatively, It cannot mean anything good. So I thought that since I had been spending time at ICM and my flight originated from Paris, I thought I'll take a chance and say France. And he said, "यहाँ कहाँ से हैं?" So, where are you from around here? So I said, Bhopal. And he gave me a big smile and he said, that's where you're from. So while Professor Call was right in saying I'm doing stuff at the David O'Brien Center and other places, I just want you to think of me as a homeboy who for 35 years now has been cultivating a multinational perspective, and I'm here to share that perspective with you in the context of sustainability, particularly for India. This is a very important topic. Sustainability in a globalizing world, with India with 1.3 billion people playing a very important role. I'm really glad that the college has picked up on this theme and brought this conference over here. Multinational enterprises have a very big role to play in sustainability, both positive and sometimes negative, but they are an actor that we cannot ignore. So it's really timely and appropriate for us to pay some attention to what multinational corporations should be doing and thinking about when it comes to sustainable development. Now, in order to just give you a little bit of a warning, all the gentlemen before, so somebody said we should have intellectual honesty, and somebody else said that we should look back deeply into our past and our history. So I'm going to try to do something that you probably are not expecting. I'm not going to talk about normal topics that are explored at such conferences, such as business and finance and strategy and product development, etc. I'm going to talk about a holistic kind of development that emanates from a deep understanding of culture and the arts. So please bear with me. I'll spend maybe about 30 minutes giving you a gist of what I have to propose, and then if we have time, maybe we can do some discussion. And I certainly hope that we will have opportunity to discuss during the conference. So just to begin with an outline, what I want to cover is briefly explain what the challenge of sustainability is, both in economic terms, economic and social terms, and also in ecological and climate terms. Then I want to add to the global challenge by explaining what is special about India. What are special challenges of sustainability for India? Because I think India is not in the same place as the rest of the world. After that, I want to propose a more holistic sustainable development idea that is focused on the poor and that leverages arts and aesthetics. I will give you some examples of how this is being done through aesthetic innovations for ecological and for social and for economic development, and then suggest some ways in which multinational enterprises can engage arts for sustainable development of the poor. I also want to make a small comment about the presentation PowerPoint that you're seeing. The images, I've just used images over here, and there is a particular reason for it. The talk involves art and aesthetics, so pictures are important. There are some keywords to just keep track of where we are. But the images come from two sources. One of the sources sitting on the dais, no, not on the dais anymore, she walked away, is Vera Ivanaj, who besides being a professor and all the other good things you heard about her, is also a painter. And so the images that you see, one image is done by Vera Ivanaj, and the second image is done by NASA. NASA about 15 years ago sent a low Earth orbit satellite into space to take photographs of the Earth. And so you see one picture of the Earth, and you can see what part of the Earth, for example, over here on the left-hand side, This is the Haro and Khas Hills in the Kutch region of India. It's an equally beautiful painting of the earth. And the reason I'm showing you these is that we are doing a project where we want people to see the earth not in terms of nations, but as bioscapes, where there are no political boundaries, no political borders. We think we have completely confused ourselves by looking at the earth in terms of political jurisdictions. And in at least today's talk, I would like you to think about the earth as a beautiful place reflected in these pictures, both from NASA photographs and from Vera's paintings. So let me begin with the first point about what the challenge of global sustainability is. And I'm going to break it into two parts, economic, social sustainability challenge, and then the second part will be the ecological one. So the economic social sustainability challenge has been articulated for at least the last 40 years. And there's a very wide debate about why it is happening. I'm just going to give you some highlights to kind of punctuate a general understanding of what this challenge is. In terms of population, when I was born, the population of the world was about 2.6 billion. Today the population is around 7 billion, 7.1 billion, and it's going to become 9 to 10 billion before it stabilizes by 2040. This is a very different kind of world than we have ever lived in. This increasing population, particularly in India and in China and other countries, is going to require us to have economies that are much larger than its current size. The economy, the GDP of the world, has been moving upwards. In 1950, it was about $5.3 trillion. Today, it is $75 trillion, and by 2040, it is going to be tripled, close to $230 or $240 trillion. Almost half of it will be in China. And not only that, but this GDP is increasingly becoming more and more carbon intensive. And I will explain what that implies in a moment. Even despite all these growth projections, we are in the midst of an economic crisis. Professor Dinesh Singh referred to it. There is a global economic slowdown, including in India. We know now that this economic slowdown is not likely to be short-lived. It is likely to be a long-term slowdown, much like what Japan has experienced in the last 15 years, where it has remained between -2% to +2% growth. Most of Western Europe and the United States are experiencing a 1 to 2% growth, and that's expected to continue. India, which was projecting 9, 10, 11% growth, is already forecasting 5.6 to 6% growth, and even that is going to become very difficult. So we are going to have to deal with a long period of some kind of economic slowdown. Global poverty at the same time remains unabated. Almost 20% of the world is living in poverty, at miserable poverty. The middle class, which we used to be very proud of, has remained stagnant in terms of its economic well-being for almost 30 years in terms of real income. And we are starting to see that the people who have been excluded from development are not going to remain patient forever. All across North Africa and the Middle East, you have seen the Arab Spring uprisings. In the United States and in almost 100 other countries, you have witnessed the Occupy Wall Street movement. In India, you have seen all kinds of agitation against corruption. So people don't want to remain in the economic social conditions of the last decade or two or a century. At the same time, the slowdown also has an impact on labor. Already unemployment rates in the United United States and Western Europe are hovering around double digits. In some countries, they are as high as 25%, and in some sectors, like the youth, they are as high as 40%. There are 400 million people that are unemployed now. Labor surplus of 400 million people. That's a nation as large as the United States, and then some. So obviously, we are at a point of disjuncture from the past. We cannot continue to do what we have been doing. The current economic approaches of continuously thinking about growth and taking out of nature and putting it into our pockets as human beings is not a sustainable strategy. We need some kind of fundamental rethinking of what sustainability means, what sustainable development means. Let me quickly move to ecological sustainability. Manage two computers at the same time. So what's happening ecologically? Well, one summary number that the scientific community in the world has agreed to in terms of describing ecological sustainability is the amount of carbon in the Earth's atmosphere. So we can take that as a summary of the sort of quality of the natural ecosystems. Now, global carbon for almost 1 million years on Earth has been under 200 parts per million. All of the Earth's ecosystem has stabilized under those conditions of about 200 parts per million. When we discovered coal and fossil fuel in the mid-18th century and started burning that for fuel, the amount of carbon into the atmosphere started increasing. Today it is at about 387 parts per million. The IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the National Academies of Sciences of the G20 nations have reached a consensus that we should be close to 350 to 360 parts per million if we want to remain in the kind of Earth that we have seen. If we don't control carbon, it will keep on increasing. It will keep on increasing to 400 parts per million, even 500 and 600 parts per million under certain scenarios of the IPCC. At about 425 parts per million, we start seeing global warming effects disrupt virtually everything that we know. Agricultural systems will lose productivity by up to 20% of the global GDP. Almost 200 million people will become what are called climate displaced people. Disease vectors will start switching around so that diseases that were never known in parts of the world will start moving to them. We don't want to get to 425 parts per million. So we've reached all these global treaties on sustainability that want to bring us back. But unfortunately, the actual amount of carbon seems to keep on increasing despite the treaties, despite our best efforts. The other point I want to make about ecological sustainability challenge deals with what's called HAMPP, which stands for the Global Human Appropriation of Net Primary Production. This is the amount of production that nature produces through photosynthesis on Earth on an annual basis. Humans as a single species now consume 40% of the total global HAMPP. And all the remaining millions of species have to share the rest. So it's not surprising that we are losing biological diversity.